The dust swirled in angry copper clouds as Isabella O'Malley rode into Jerome, Arizona territory. In the summer of 1885, her 3 children huddled close in the wagon behind her. She'd heard whispers that Jerome was becoming a booming mining town, a place where a woman with nothing but determination and 3 wild-eyed children might carve out a new beginning. The journey from St. Louis had taken everything she had: her savings, her strength, and nearly her faith, but the mountains rising in the distance held the promise of something she hadn't felt in years: possibility. "Mama, I'm thirsty," her youngest, Henry, whimpered, his small hand tugging at her worn cotton sleeve. "Just a little further, love," she promised, though her own throat felt like sandpaper. The water barrel had sprung a leak 2 days back, leaving them with precious little to share among the 4 of them. Isabella pulled the wagon to a stop at the edge of town. Jerome clung to the side of Cleopatra Hill, its buildings scattered like playing cards tossed by a careless hand. The copper mine dominated the landscape, its presence felt even before it could be seen. Men moved about like ants, their faces streaked with dirt and exhaustion. This wasn't the place of her dreams, but dreams had become a luxury she could no longer afford. "Remember what I told you," she said, turning to face her children. 10-year-old Charlotte, 8-year-old James, and 6-year-old Henry stared back at her with solemn eyes that had seen too much. "Best behavior. We're starting fresh here." "Yes, Mama," they chorused, but Isabella knew better. Her children were wild things, born of grief and endless travel. Charlotte could pick any lock with a hairpin. James had a knack for finding trouble in empty rooms, and little Henry could disappear faster than morning dew under a hot sun. She guided the wagon toward what appeared to be the main street, where a weathered sign proclaimed Miller's General Store. As she pulled to a stop, a man emerged from the store, wiping his hands on a stained apron. His eyebrows rose at the sight of a woman alone with 3 children. "Madam," he said with a nod. "New to Jerome." "Just arrived," Isabella replied, climbing down from the wagon. Her legs trembled beneath her skirt, stiff from days of sitting. "I'm looking for work and a place to stay." The man, Mr. Miller, she presumed, looked her up and down, taking in her travel-worn appearance and the 3 curious faces peering from the wagon. "Not much for a woman with children here. The boarding houses are full of minors, not suitable for little ones." Isabella felt her heart sink. She'd come too far to turn back now. "I can cook, clean, so I'm not afraid of hard work." Miller seemed ready to shake his head when a deep voice spoke from behind him. "I could use some help at the ranch." Isabella turned to see a man leaning against a hitching post. Tall and broad-shouldered, he stood with the easy confidence of someone who knew their place in the world. His face was partially obscured by the brim of his hat, but she could make out a strong jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble. He wasn't young, perhaps 40, but he carried himself with the strength of a man who worked the land. "Isaac Owens," he said by way of introduction. "Got a spread about 5 miles outside town. Lost my housekeeper last month. She got married and moved to Prescott." His eyes, clear and blue as Arizona sky, moved from Isabella to the children. "Ranch needs someone who can cook and keep house." Isabella straightened her spine, ignoring the protest of her tired muscles. "Isabella O'Malley, Mr. Owens. These are my children, Charlotte, James, and Henry." Isaac nodded at each child in turn, then returned his gaze to Isabella. "The work's hard, but the pay's fair. Got a separate cabin for you and your young uns. It's not fancy, but it's sound." "We don't need fancy, Mr. Owens. Just honest work and a roof." Isabella's mind raced. Working on a ranch meant isolation, but also safety for her children. They'd have space to run, to be the wild creatures they were without the constraints of town life. Isaac pushed his hat back, revealing a shock of dark hair threaded with silver. "It's just me and my boy Caleb at the house. He's 15, got 3 ranch hands who bunk in the bunkhouse. You'd be expected to cook for all of us and keep the main house in order." "I can do that," Isabella said firmly. A man on his own with just a teenaged son, there was a story there, but she wasn't one to pry. Everyone in the West seemed to be running from something or toward something. She was no different. Isaac nodded once, decision made. "We'll head out in an hour. Need to finish my business in town. You and your children can wait here or get supplies if you need them." As Isaac walked away, Isabella felt the weight of her decision. She was placing her fate and the fate of her children in the hands of a stranger, but something in his straightforward manner reassured her. His eyes had been honest at least. "Mama, are we going to live on a ranch?" James asked, his voice bright with excitement. "It seems we are," Isabella replied. "And you'll all mind your manners and be helpful, won't you?" 3 heads nodded solemnly, though Isabella saw the mischief dancing in Charlotte's eyes. Her eldest was already plotting something. Isabella could tell by the slight curl at the corner of her mouth. The hour passed quickly as Isabella used their meager funds to purchase necessities: flour, sugar, coffee, and a small bag of hard candies for the children. She was counting out coins when Isaac returned, his wagon now loaded with supplies of his own. "Ready?" he asked simply. Isabella nodded and climbed into her wagon, clicking to the horses. They followed Isaac's wagon out of Jerome, leaving behind the bustle of the mining town for the open expanse of the high desert. The journey to the ranch took nearly 2 hours, the trail winding through scrubby juniper and prickly pear. The children, initially excited by the adventure, had grown quiet, lulled by the steady sway of the wagon. Even Charlotte's usual chatter had faded to silence. When they crested a small rise, Isabella caught her first glimpse of what would be their new home. The ranch spread across a valley, green with summer grass, a stark contrast to the red earth surrounding it. A creek cut through the property, explaining the unexpected verdant landscape. The main house was substantial, 2 stories of sturdy logs with a wide porch. A smaller cabin sat about 50 yards away, and beyond that, a barn and corral where several horses grazed. It was beautiful in a rugged way, a place carved from wilderness by human determination. Isaac pulled his wagon to a stop in front of the smaller cabin. "This'll be yours. It's simple, but it'll keep out the weather." Isabella climbed down and helped her children from the wagon. The cabin was indeed simple: 1 main room with a stone fireplace, and 2 smaller rooms off to the side. A porch wrapped around 2 sides, offering shade from the afternoon sun. "It's perfect," she said, meaning it. After months on the road, sleeping under canvas when they could afford it and under stars when they couldn't, walls and a roof seemed the height of luxury. Isaac nodded. "Get settled in. Come to the main house for supper at 6. We can talk more then." As he walked away, Isabella turned to her children. "Well, this is our new home. Let's make it ours." The cabin had been kept clean, though it was clear no one had lived in it for some time. Isabella opened windows to let in the fresh air while the children explored their new surroundings. Charlotte claimed a corner of 1 bedroom for herself, while the boys would share the other. Isabella would sleep on a cot in the main room, giving her children the privacy of their own space. By the time 6 o'clock approached, they had arranged their few belongings and washed off the dust of travel. Isabella had changed into her one good dress, a simple blue calico that had seen better days but was at least clean. She'd braided Charlotte's hair and made sure the boys' faces were scrubbed. "Remember," she said as they walked toward the main house, "best manners. This is our chance to start fresh." The main house was warm with the smell of cooking when they entered. Isaac stood at the stove, stirring something in a large pot. A gangly boy, Caleb, she presumed, was setting plates on a long wooden table. 3 other men, the ranch hands most likely, sat at one end, their conversation stopping as Isabella and her children entered. "Mrs. O'Malley," Isaac said with a nod. "This is my son, Caleb, and these are my hands, Tom, Frank, and Hector." Isabella nodded to each in turn, noting the curious but not unkind looks they gave her children. "Thank you for having us, Mr. Owens." "Isaac," he corrected. "No need for formalities here. We're simple folk." Supper was a simple but hearty stew with fresh baked bread that Isaac had made. Isabella was surprised by his cooking skills. Most men she'd known couldn't boil water without burning it. "This is delicious," she said after her first bite. Isaac's mouth quirked up at one corner, not quite a smile, but close. "Had to learn after my wife passed. Been 10 years now." "I'm sorry for your loss," Isabella said quietly. "Life happens," he replied with a shrug that didn't quite hide the lingering grief. "You'll start tomorrow." "Breakfast at 5 for the hands. I take coffee at 4:30 before I check the herd." Isabella nodded, mentally adjusting her schedule. Early mornings were nothing new to her. "Your children," Isaac continued, his gaze moving to Charlotte, James, and Henry, who were surprisingly well-behaved for the moment. "They're welcome to help where they can. Caleb can show them around tomorrow, teach them about ranch life." "Thank you," Isabella said. "They're eager to learn." It was true enough, though what her children were eager to learn wasn't always what adults wanted to teach them. After supper, Isabella and the children returned to their cabin. The night was cool, a relief after the heat of the day. She sat on the porch steps, watching as her children chased fireflies in the gathering dusk. "Mama, I like it here," Henry said, coming to sit beside her. His small hand slipped into hers, warm and trusting. "So do I," she admitted. The ranch had a peacefulness she hadn't expected. After years of struggling alone, the idea of stability was almost foreign. Later, as she tucked her children into their beds, Charlotte fixed her with a serious look. "We're going to stay here, aren't we, Mama? For good?" Isabella smoothed her daughter's hair back from her forehead. "We'll see, Charlotte. If we work hard and mind our manners, maybe we can make a home here." "I want to stay," Charlotte whispered, and Isabella heard the longing in her voice. Her fierce, independent daughter, who had faced every hardship with stubborn determination, was tired of wandering too. "Then we'll do our best," Isabella promised. The next morning came early. Isabella was up before 4, stoking the fire and preparing for her first day of work. She left the children sleeping and made her way to the main house, where a lamp already glowed in the kitchen window. Isaac sat at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in front of him. He looked up as she entered, nodding in greeting. "Coffee's hot," he said, gesturing to the pot on the stove. "Thank you." Isabella poured herself a cup and began examining the kitchen, familiarizing herself with the layout. It was well organized, evidence of Isaac's methodical nature. "The hands like a hearty breakfast," Isaac said. "Eggs, bacon, biscuits if you've got time. They work hard, need the fuel." "I'll make sure they're well fed," Isabella assured him, rolling up her sleeves. She found flour, lard, and buttermilk and set about making biscuits first, as they would take the longest. Isaac watched her for a moment, then stood. "I'll be back for breakfast. Need to check on a mare that's about to foal." After he left, Isabella settled into a rhythm, the familiar tasks of cooking grounding her. By the time the ranch hands filed in at 5, she had breakfast-ready golden biscuits, crisp bacon, scrambled eggs, and fried potatoes. "Madam," Tom, the oldest of the hands, said with appreciation as he filled his plate, "this is a sight better than what the boss makes." Isabella smiled. "Thank you, and please call me Isabella." The men ate with the focused dedication of those who worked physically demanding jobs. Caleb joined them, a bit bleary-eyed but polite, thanking Isabella for the meal. Isaac returned last, his shirt sleeve damp from washing up outside. "Mare had her foal," he announced as he filled his plate. "Strong little colt, good bloodlines." "Congratulations," Isabella said, feeling a small spark of joy at the news of new life. As the men finished and headed out to begin their day's work, Isaac lingered. "Your children still sleeping? They were when I left." "They were exhausted from the journey." Isaac nodded. "Let them rest. When they're up, Caleb can show them around. Keep them out of trouble." Isabella almost laughed. No one had yet managed to keep her children out of trouble, but she appreciated the offer. "Thank you. I'll send them over when they're ready." Isaac stood, placing his empty plate in the wash basin. "The garden behind the house needs tending. Previous housekeeper kept it up, but it's been neglected these past weeks. If you've got a green thumb, feel free to make use of it." "I'd like that," Isabella said, surprised by the offer. A garden meant he expected her to stay, at least through harvest. After Isaac left, Isabella cleaned the kitchen and began making an inventory of supplies. The pantry was well stocked but disorganized, and she set about putting things in order. By mid-morning, her children appeared at the back door of the main house, bright-eyed and eager to explore their new surroundings. "Mama, there are horses," James exclaimed. "Real ones, not just work horses, riding horses." "And chickens," Henry added. "A whole bunch of them." Charlotte, more reserved, studied the house with a critical eye. "It's nice here," she finally said, which from Charlotte was high praise indeed. "I'm glad you approve," Isabella said dryly. "Now, Mr. Owens said his son Caleb would show you around today. But remember, best behavior." The three chorused, exchanging glances that suggested best behavior was open to interpretation. "I mean it," Isabella warned. "This is our chance for a fresh start. Don't spoil it on the first day." As if summoned by their conversation, Caleb appeared at the barn door, waving to the children. "Pa said you might want to see the new foal," he called. The children looked to Isabella, who nodded her permission. "Go on, but mind Caleb and stay out of the way of the men working." They raced off, even Charlotte's usual dignity forgotten in the excitement of exploration. Isabella watched them go with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Her children were good at heart, but they were wild things, unaccustomed to boundaries after years on the road. The day passed quickly. Isabella prepared a midday meal for the ranch hands, then turned her attention to the garden. It was overgrown but salvageable, with tomato plants heavy with green fruit, climbing beans, squash, and herbs. She spent the afternoon weeding and staking plants that had fallen, losing herself in the rhythmic work. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice Isaac's approach until his shadow fell across the garden plot. "You've made progress," he observed, looking at the neat rows she'd restored. Isabella sat back on her heels, wiping sweat from her brow with the back of her hand. "It's a good garden. Whoever planned it knew what they were doing." "That'd be my wife, Caroline. She had a way with growing things." Isaac's voice held that same distant grief she'd noted before, not raw, but never fully healed. She must have been a remarkable woman. She was. Isaac's gaze moved from the garden to the distant hills. "Your children seem to be settling in." Caleb showed them the foal, then the creek. "Said they're full of questions." Isabella laughed. "That they are, especially James. He wants to know how everything works. Curious minds are valuable on a ranch, always problems that need solving." Isaac looked back at her. "They're spirited children." "That's a polite way of putting it," Isabella said wryly. "They're wild, Mr. Owens. Isaac, I won't pretend otherwise. Life hasn't given them much chance to be anything else." Isaac's expression softened slightly. "Wild isn't always bad. Takes grit to survive out here." Yes, it does. Isabella stood, brushing dirt from her skirt. I should start supper. I'll send the children back to help you. Isaac hesitated, then added, You've done good work today, Isabella. Thank you. It was a simple acknowledgement, but it warmed her. It had been a long time since anyone had thanked her for anything. Supper that evening was livelier than the previous night, her children bubbling over with stories of their day, how Caleb had shown them the proper way to approach a horse, how they'd caught minnows in the creek, how they'd watched Hector shoe a horse. Can I learn to ride, Mama? James asked, eyes shining with excitement. Caleb said he'd teach me if you said it was all right. Me too, Henry piped up. I want to ride too, we'll see, Isabella said cautiously. Riding is dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. I could teach them, Isaac offered unexpectedly. Started Caleb when he was 4, never too young to learn out here. Isabella met his gaze across the table. That's very generous. It's practical. Everyone on a ranch should know how to handle a horse. His tone was matter-of-fact, but Isabella sensed there was more to the offer than simple practicality. Then thank you. I'm sure they'll be eager students. Later, as Isabella prepared the children for bed back in their cabin, Charlotte sat on the edge of her bed, watching as Isabella braided her hair. Mr. Owens is nice, she said thoughtfully. Not like those other men who were nice to you until they weren't. Isabella's hands stilled for a moment. Charlotte had always been perceptive, noticing things a child shouldn't have to notice. Yes, he seems to be genuinely kind. And he likes you, Charlotte added with the certainty of youth. He appreciates having help around the ranch, that's all, Isabella corrected gently. Charlotte shrugged, unconvinced. I saw how he looked at you in the garden. It's different. Isabella finished the braid, tying it with a ribbon. Time for sleep, my wise one. Tomorrow will be another busy day. But as she sat on the porch after the children were asleep, Isabella found herself thinking about Charlotte's words. Isaac Owens was different from the men she'd encountered in her years of wandering. There was a steadiness to him, a quiet strength that spoke of a man who knew who he was and what mattered to him. It was attractive, she had to admit, but she hadn't come to Jerome looking for romance. She'd come looking for security for her children, a place where they could put down roots. Still, as the stars emerged in the clear Arizona sky, Isabella allowed herself a moment to wonder what it might be like to be more than just a housekeeper in this beautiful, wild place. The next few weeks established a rhythm to their days. Isabella rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, tended to the house and garden during the day, and cooked the evening meal. The children divided their time between helping her with chores and following Caleb around the ranch, learning about everything from repairing fences to recognizing which snakes were dangerous. True to his word, Isaac began teaching them to ride. He started with Henry, the youngest and most fearless, placing him on a gentle mare and leading him around the corral. James followed, his face a mixture of terror and delight as he bounced along on his first solo ride. Even Charlotte, who had initially declared horses smelly and too big, eventually joined in, discovering a natural seat and quiet confidence in the saddle. Isabella watched these lessons when she could, marveling at Isaac's patience. He was firm but never harsh, demanding attention but understanding when little boys got distracted by passing butterflies or distant hawks. He treated her children with the same respect he showed adults, listening to their questions and considering their opinions. And somehow, despite their wild natures, her children responded to this treatment by trying to live up to his expectations. They still had their moments, like when James released a garden snake in the kitchen just to hear Isabella scream, or when Charlotte disappeared for 3 hours, sending the entire ranch into a panic, before she was discovered reading in the hayloft, but they were, slowly, learning boundaries. One evening, about a month after their arrival, Isabella found Isaac sitting alone on the porch of the main house, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains gold and crimson. "May I join you?" she asked. He nodded, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. "Beautiful evening." "It is." Isabella settled into the chair, feeling the tension of the day ease from her shoulders. "I wanted to thank you for your patience with the children, especially today. Today had been particularly trying." Henry had decided to help by feeding the chickens, but had scattered feed so enthusiastically that every bird on the ranch had descended on the yard, creating a feathered chaos that took hours to resolve. Isaac's mouth quirked in that almost smile she'd come to recognize. "Henry's got a good heart, just moves faster than his brain sometimes." "That's a charitable way of putting it," Isabella said with a laugh. "Sometimes I wonder if they'll ever learn to think before they act. They're children. That's their job, to test limits, to see what happens when they push boundaries. They'll settle as they grow." Isabella sighed. "I hope you're right. Sometimes I worry that our life, before always moving, never staying in one place long enough to form attachments, has made them wild in ways that can't be tamed." Isaac was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the fading light. "My children were wild too," he finally said. "Caleb still is, in his way." "Children?" Isabella asked gently. "You had others besides Caleb, a daughter, Emma. She was 2 years younger than Caleb." His voice remained steady, but his hands tightened on the arms of his chair. "Lost her to fever when she was 8, same one that took Caroline." "I'm so sorry," Isabella whispered, feeling the inadequacy of the words even as she spoke them. "That's a terrible loss." It was. Isaac's eyes met hers, and in them she saw a grief that mirrored her own, tempered by time but never truly gone. "Left me and Caleb to figure things out on our own. Wasn't easy, still isn't some days. No, it never is." Isabella hesitated, then decided to share her own story. Isaac had offered his, it seemed only fair to reciprocate. "My husband, Michael, died 4 years ago, logging accident in Michigan. I tried to make a go of it there, but without him." She trailed off, remembering the bitter cold, the empty cupboards, the pitying looks from neighbors. "So you headed west?" "Not right away. Tried St. Louis first. Found work in a laundry, but the conditions were terrible. Charlotte got sick from the steam and chemicals." Isabella shook her head, pushing away the memory of her daughter's rattling cough, the fear that had driven her final decision. "I'd heard about opportunities in the Arizona territory. A new start." Isaac nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Takes courage to pull up stakes and head into the unknown with 3 young ones." "Or desperation," Isabella replied with a rueful smile. "Sometimes they're the same thing." Isaac leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You've done well here, Isabella. The house hasn't been this well kept since Caroline was alive. The men are happier with decent meals. Even Caleb seems more settled, having your children around." "Thank you," Isabella said, warmed by the praise. "It's been good for us too. The children need stability, a place to belong." "And you?" Isaac asked, his blue eyes intent on her face. "What do you need, Isabella O'Malley?" The question caught her off guard. What did she need? For so long, her focus had been solely on survival, on keeping her children fed and safe. Her own needs had been set aside, deemed unimportant in the face of necessity. "I suppose," she said slowly, "I need to know that my children will be all right, that they'll grow up with opportunities I didn't have, and maybe—" She hesitated, the words feeling foreign on her tongue. "Maybe I need to know that I'm more than just their mother, that I'm still a woman in my own right." Isaac's gaze held hers, something warming in its depths. "You're definitely still a woman, Isabella, Any fool with eyes can see that. A flush heated her cheeks and she looked away, suddenly aware of how alone they were in the gathering dusk. It's getting late. I should check on the children. Isaac nodded, rising to his feet as she stood. Of course. Good night, Isabella. Good night, Isaac. As she walked back to the cabin, Isabella felt a curious lightness in her step, as if sharing even that small part of her story had lifted a weight she'd carried for too long. The summer heat gave way to the milder days of early fall. The garden yielded its bounty, keeping Isabella busy with canning and preserving. The children continued their adventures around the ranch, growing tanned and strong under the Arizona sun. James developed a particular interest in the cattle, following Hector around and asking endless questions about breeding and grazing patterns. Charlotte, to Isabella's surprise, showed an aptitude for working with horses, spending hours brushing them and learning from Caleb how to clean hooves and check for injuries. Henry, still too young for most ranch work, appointed himself helper to everyone, carrying tools, fetching water, and generally getting underfoot with cheerful enthusiasm. Isabella watched these developments with a mixture of pride and wistfulness. Her children were blossoming here, finding interests and talents that city life would never have revealed. But their growing independence was a reminder that someday they wouldn't need her so intensely, a thought that was both reassuring and terrifying. One crisp October morning, Isabella was kneading bread dough when Isaac entered the kitchen, his expression serious. "Need to talk to you," he said without preamble. "Got word that a mountain lion's been seen near the north pasture. Took down one of Johnson's calves last night." Isabella's hands stilled in the dough. "Is it a danger to the children?" "Could be. Mountain lions generally avoid people, but they are unpredictable when hungry." Isaac poured himself a cup of coffee. "I've told Caleb to keep the young ones close to the buildings until we can track it and drive it back up into the higher country. Thank you for letting me know. I'll speak to them as well." Isabella resumed kneading, pressing perhaps harder than necessary. The thought of her children in danger made her stomach twist. Isaac watched her for a moment. "You're worried." "Of course I am. They're my children. They're smart kids. They'll heed the warning." Isabella gave a short laugh. "You don't know them as well as you think you do. Telling James there's a mountain lion out there is practically an invitation for him to go looking for it." Isaac's mouth twitched. "Fair point. We'll need to be extra vigilant." He hesitated, then added, "I was planning to ride up to the north pasture today, check for tracks. Could use another pair of eyes if you're interested." Isabella looked up in surprise. "You want me to come with you, if you'd like. Figured you might want to see more of the ranch than just the house and garden." The offer was tempting. Isabella hadn't been on a horse since before Henry was born, and she missed the freedom of riding. And if she were honest with herself, the prospect of spending a day with Isaac, away from the routine of housekeeping, was appealing. "I'd like that," she said. "But who will watch the children?" "Caleb can handle them for a day. Tom's wife is coming by to help with some sewing. She can keep an eye on them too." Isabella nodded, making her decision. "Then yes, I'd be glad to come." An hour later, Isabella found herself mounted on a steady bay mare, following Isaac out of the ranch yard. She wore a divided riding skirt she'd hastily altered from an old dress, her hair secured in a practical braid. The day was perfect for riding, cool enough to be comfortable, with a sky so intensely blue it almost hurt to look at it. "You sit a horse well," Isaac observed as they rode side by side along a narrow trail leading up into the hills. "Been riding long, since childhood. My father raised horses in Pennsylvania, not as grand as your ranch, but I grew up in the saddle." Isabella smiled at the memory. "It's been years, though. I'd forgotten how much I enjoy it." Riding's good for the soul, Isaac agreed. Gets a person out of their own head. They rode in comfortable silence for a time, the only sounds the steady clop of hooves on dirt and the occasional call of a bird. Isabella found herself relaxing, drinking in the wild beauty of the landscape. This high desert country was so different from the lush forests of her Pennsylvania childhood or the crowded streets of St. Louis. But there was a stark majesty to it that spoke to something deep within her. As they climbed higher, the view expanded, revealing the patchwork of the ranch below the cluster of buildings, the green swath of creek-fed pasture, the scattered cattle grazing on the hillsides. "It's beautiful," Isabella said softly. "You've built something remarkable here, Isaac." "Wasn't just me. My father started it. Then Caroline and I expanded it. Now it's Caleb's legacy." Isaac's gaze swept over his land with a mixture of pride and responsibility. "A piece of earth to call your own, that's the real American dream, not gold or fame. Is that why you came west?" Isabella asked. Isaac nodded. "My father was restless, always looking for more space, more opportunity. We moved from Kentucky when I was 12, settled here when Arizona was still mostly wilderness. Learned ranching from him, then took over when his heart gave out." "And you've never wanted to move on, to see what else might be out there?" Isaac considered the question. "Thought about it once or twice, especially after Caroline and Emma died. Considered selling up, taking Caleb somewhere new, but this land, it gets in your blood, becomes part of who you are." He looked at her curiously. "Do you miss the city? The conveniences, the society?" Isabella laughed. "Hardly. The society I knew was other laundry women with raw hands and aching backs. As for conveniences, having clean air to breathe and space for my children to run seems a fair trade for having to pump my own water." They reached a small plateau, where a spring bubbled up from the rocks, creating a tiny oasis of greenery. Isaac dismounted and helped Isabella down, his hands strong and sure at her waist. The brief contact sent a ripple of awareness through her that she tried to ignore. "Good place to rest the horses," Isaac said, leading them to the spring. "And a likely spot for tracking. Animals come here to drink." They let the horses drink while Isaac examined the soft earth around the spring. Isabella watched as he crouched, studying marks in the mud that were invisible to her untrained eye. "Mountain lion was here," he finally said, pointing to a clear paw print. "Big one. Male, probably." Isabella knelt beside him, examining the track. "How recently?" "Last night, judging by how fresh it is." Isaac's expression was grim. "He's hunting close to the ranch. Not good." "Will you have to kill it?" Isabella asked, aware of the conflicting emotions the question raised in her. She wanted her children safe, but there was something sad about destroying such a magnificent creature for simply following its nature. "Hope not. Prefer to drive it back into the high country where it belongs, but if it starts seeing the ranch as an easy meal." Isaac left the thought unfinished. They sat by the spring and shared the lunch Isabella had packed: cold chicken, biscuits, and apple slices. The conversation flowed easily between them, touching on childhood memories, books they'd read, hopes for their children's futures. Isabella found herself laughing more than she had in years, drawn out of her usual reserve by Isaac's dry wit and thoughtful questions. "You should laugh more often," Isaac said as they prepared to mount up again. "Suits you." Isabella ducked her head, pleased and embarrassed by the compliment. "Life hasn't given me much cause for laughter these past years." "Then life's been a fool," Isaac replied simply, and helped her back onto her horse. They spent the afternoon riding the boundaries of the ranch, checking for more signs of the mountain lion and ensuring the cattle were safe. By the time they turned back toward home, the sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the land. "Thank you for today," Isabella said as they rode side by side down the trail. It's been refreshing. Isaac nodded. Been good to see the ranch through fresh eyes. Makes me appreciate it more. As they approached the ranch yard, Isabella could see her children playing near the corral with Caleb. At the sight of the riders, they came running, full of excited questions about the mountain lion and indignant complaints about being confined to the yard all day. "Did you see it?" James asked, his eyes wide. "Did it try to eat you?" "No, but we saw its tracks," Isabella replied, dismounting with Isaac's help. "And it's big enough that it could certainly eat little boys who don't mind their mothers." James looked more intrigued than frightened by this prospect, but Charlotte gave her brother a shove. "Don't even think about it, James. Mountain lions are dangerous." "Your sister's right," Isaac said, his tone serious. "Promise me you'll stay close to the buildings until we've dealt with this cat." James sighed dramatically but nodded. "Yes, sir." Henry tugged at Isabella's skirt. "Mama, Mrs. Ross taught me and Charlotte how to make apple dumplings. Can we make some for supper?" "That sounds wonderful, Henry." Isabella smoothed his hair, her heart full at the simple domestic scene. This was what she'd wanted for her children, not just safety, but joy in small things. The freedom to be children instead of miniature adults shouldering burdens too heavy for them. As they walked toward the house, Isabella felt Isaac's gaze on her and turned to meet it. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding, a recognition of shared values and compatible spirits. It warmed her more deeply than she was prepared to acknowledge, even to herself. That night, after the children were asleep, Isabella sat on the porch of their cabin, a shawl wrapped around her shoulders against the autumn chill. The day's ride had left her pleasantly tired, her muscles aching in ways that reminded her of her younger, more carefree days. The sound of footsteps made her look up. Isaac approached through the darkness, a lantern in his hand. "Thought you might still be up," he said, stopping at the foot of the steps. "Mind if I join you, please?" Isabella gestured to the space beside her on the rough-hewn bench. Isaac set the lantern on the porch rail and sat, his solid presence reassuring in the quiet night. "Wanted to check if you're feeling all right after the ride. Been a while since you were in the saddle." "I'm a bit sore," Isabella admitted with a smile, "but it's a good kind of sore. Reminds me I'm alive." Isaac nodded, understanding. "Been thinking about what you said today about your children being wild." "Oh." Isabella tensed slightly, wondering if something had happened while she was away. "They're good kids, Isabella. Spirited, yes. Curious, definitely. But there's no meanness in them, no real wildness, just the natural energy of youth." Isaac turned to look at her, his face half in shadow, half illuminated by the lantern's glow. "You've done well by them, especially considering the hardships you've faced." The simple validation brought unexpected tears to Isabella's eyes. For so long, she doubted herself, wondered if her choices had damaged her children in ways that couldn't be repaired. "Thank you for saying that," she whispered. "Sometimes I feel like I'm failing them. That if Michael had lived, they'd be better behaved, more settled." Isaac shook his head. "Children need love and boundaries. You've given them both. The rest comes with time." "And a stable home," Isabella added, voicing the fear that had been growing as they settled into life at the ranch. "Which I haven't been able to provide until now. You have a home here, Isabella." Isaac's voice was quiet but firm. "For as long as you want it." The words hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond the simple offer of employment. Isabella felt her heart quicken, aware that they were approaching a threshold neither had explicitly acknowledged. "Isaac," she began, uncertain what she wanted to say but feeling the need to say something. Before she could continue, a howl split the night close, too close to be anything but the mountain lion they'd been tracking, Isaac was on his feet instantly, his hand going to the pistol at his hip. Inside. Now. Isabella didn't argue, hurrying into the cabin and closing the door firmly behind them. The children slept on, unaware of the danger lurking in the darkness. "Stay here. Keep the door locked," Isaac instructed, his voice low and urgent. "I'll check the main house, make sure Caleb's secure, then get the men. We'll hunt this cat tonight before it gets any bolder." "Be careful," Isabella said, fear clutching at her heart. The thought of Isaac facing the mountain lion in the darkness terrified her, revealing just how much he had come to mean to her in these few short months. Isaac paused, his hand on the door latch. "Always am." Then, in a move that surprised them both, he leaned down and pressed a swift, hard kiss to her lips. "For luck," he murmured, and was gone before she could respond. Isabella stood frozen, her fingers touching her lips where the warmth of his kiss lingered. Then the reality of the situation reasserted itself, and she moved quickly to check on her children, ensuring they were safe and still sleeping peacefully despite the drama unfolding outside. The night stretched endlessly. Isabella sat by the window, a rifle across her lap, one Isaac had insisted she learn to use shortly after her arrival at the ranch. Outside, she could hear the men calling to each other as they tracked the mountain lion, the occasional bark of the ranch dogs who had joined the hunt. Finally, near dawn, the sound of horses returning reached her ears. She opened the door to see Isaac dismounting, his face tired but relieved. "It's done," he said simply. "Tracked it up to the ridge and drove it deeper into the mountains. Should stay away now that it knows we're watching." "You didn't kill it?" Isabella asked, surprised and pleased. Isaac shook his head. "No need. It was just doing what comes natural to it. Better to encourage it to hunt elsewhere." He hesitated, then added, "About what happened before I left, don't," Isabella said quickly. "You don't need to explain or apologize." "Wasn't planning to apologize," Isaac said, a smile touching his weary face. "Just wanted to say I'd like to do it again, properly, when we're not in the middle of a crisis." Isabella felt a smile spreading across her own face, unexpected joy blooming in her chest. "I think I'd like that too." The weeks that followed brought changes to the ranch. With the threat of the mountain lion receding, life returned to its normal rhythms, but with a new undercurrent of possibility between Isabella and Isaac. They didn't speak directly of feelings or futures, but there were moments his hand lingering on hers as he passed her the coffee pot, her finding reasons to seek his company in the evenings, shared glances over the heads of their children at the dinner table. The children, naturally, noticed the shift immediately. "Are you going to marry Mr. Owens?" Charlotte asked bluntly one evening as Isabella brushed her hair. Isabella's hands faltered. "What makes you ask that?" Charlotte rolled her eyes with all the disdain an almost 11-year-old could muster. "Because you look at him the way Mrs. Miller looks at Mr. Miller in town, and he looks at you the same way." "It's not that simple, Charlotte." "Why not? You like him. He likes you. We like it here." Charlotte turned to face her mother. "And I think he needs someone. He's lonely." Out of the mouths of babes, Isabella thought. Even if that's true, marriage is a serious commitment, not something to rush into. "You've known him for months," Charlotte pointed out reasonably. "That's not rushing." Isabella couldn't argue with that logic. The truth was, she'd come to know Isaac better in these few months than she'd known many people after years of acquaintance. There was a directness to him, an absence of pretense that made genuine understanding possible. And yes, she had feelings for him, feelings that went beyond gratitude for the security he provided or appreciation for his kindness to her children. She admired his strength, his integrity, his quiet devotion to his land and his son. She enjoyed his dry humor and the thoughtful way he considered problems. She found comfort in his steady presence and, increasingly, a different kind of warmth in his gaze. But marriage, that was a leap she wasn't sure she was ready to make, despite Charlotte's childish certainty. November brought cooler weather and preparations for winter. Though snow was rare in this part of Arizona, the temperatures could drop enough to make life uncomfortable without proper preparation. The garden was harvested, the last vegetables stored in the root cellar beneath the main house. Firewood was chopped and stacked, winter feed for the animals secured. One chilly evening, as Thanksgiving approached, Isaac invited Isabella to join him for a walk after supper. The children were engaged in a noisy game of checkers with Caleb, safely occupied for at least an hour. They walked in companionable silence, their breath forming small clouds in the crisp air. Isaac led her to a small rise overlooking the ranch, where a single juniper tree stood sentinel against the darkening sky. "Caroline's buried here," he said quietly, "and Emma." Seemed right to lay them to rest where they could see the ranch they loved. Isabella was silent, understanding the significance of his bringing her to this place. It was a gesture of trust, of inclusion in the most private aspect of his life. "They would have liked you," Isaac continued. "Caroline especially. She always said I needed someone who wouldn't let me retreat into silence when things got hard. And do I do that?" Isabella asked softly. Isaac turned to face her, his expression serious in the fading light. "You do. You challenge me. Make me remember there's more to life than work and duty." He took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her skin. "Isabella, I'm not a man who's good with fancy words, but I know what I feel and what I want." Isabella's heart beat faster. "And what is that, your children?" "A family again." Isaac's blue eyes held hers steadily. "I'm asking if you'll consider making this arrangement permanent, becoming my wife." The words hung in the cold air between them. Isabella had known this moment was coming, had felt it approaching like a storm on the horizon, but now that it was here, she found herself speechless. "I know it hasn't been long," Isaac continued when she didn't immediately respond. "And I understand if you need time to think about it. It's a big decision, especially with your children to consider." Isabella shook her head, finding her voice at last. "It's not that. It's just—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Isaac, before I answer, I need you to understand something about me, about my past." Isaac's expression remained open, encouraging. "I'm listening." Isabella took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth, the revelation she'd avoided since arriving at the ranch. "After Michael died, before we came west, there was a period when I struggled. The children were hungry, I was desperate. I took work where I could find it, did things I'm not proud of to keep them fed." Understanding dawned in Isaac's eyes, but to her relief, there was no judgment, no disgust. "You did what you had to do to survive, to protect your children." "Yes, but not everyone would see it that way. In St. Louis, when people found out, we became outcasts. It's partly why we left." Isabella's voice trembled slightly. "I was wild once too, Isaac, not by choice but by necessity, and I couldn't bear it if I judged you for it." Isaac finished for her. Can't say I would have done any differently in your position." He squeezed her hand gently. "The past is the past, Isabella. It's who you are now that matters to me." Isabella felt something tight and painful uncoil in her chest, a fear she'd carried for so long that she'd almost forgotten what it was like to live without it. "You're a good man, Isaac Owens. Just a man trying his best, same as you're trying yours." He raised a hand to her cheek, his touch infinitely tender. "Now about that proposal." Isabella laughed, tears and joy mingling. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I'll marry you." Isaac's smile transformed his face, years falling away as he pulled her into his embrace. This kiss was nothing like the desperate, fleeting one on the night of the mountain lion hunt. It was slow, deep, a promise of partnership and passion that made Isabella's knees weak and her heart sore. When they finally broke apart, both a little breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "We'll tell the children tomorrow. Have the wedding at Christmas if that suits you." "It suits me perfectly," Isabella whispered, happiness bubbling up inside her like a spring. "But I think the children already know. Charlotte asked me last week if I was going to marry you." Isaac chuckled. "Smart girl, takes after her mother." They walked back to the ranch hand in hand, planning their future together. Isabella felt a sense of rightness, of coming home in a way that had nothing to do with physical buildings and everything to do with the man beside her and the life they would build together. The next morning, they gathered their children in the main house after breakfast. Caleb was there too, looking curious but not surprised. "We have something to tell you," Isaac began, his hand finding Isabella's in a gesture that didn't escape the notice of 4 pairs of watchful eyes. "Isabella and I have decided to get married. At Christmas." There was a moment of silence, then Henry, always the most demonstrative, let out a whoop of joy and launched himself at them, wrapping his arms around their legs. "Does that mean we get to stay forever? And Mr. Owens will be our pa?" "Yes to both," Isaac said, ruffling Henry's hair. "If that's all right with you." James, ever practical, considered this development with a serious expression. "Well, we have to change our names to Owens, if you'd like to," Isabella replied, "but it's your choice." "I want to," James decided. "James Owens sounds good, like a real cowboy." Charlotte, who had been watching the adults with a knowing smile, finally spoke. "I knew it. You both look happier already." She turned to Caleb. "Does this mean we're really going to be brother and sister now?" Caleb, at 15, caught between childhood and adulthood, shrugged with studied casualness that didn't quite hide his pleasure. "Guess so. You're not too annoying for a girl." Charlotte rolled her eyes but smiled. "And you're not too terrible for a boy." Isaac cleared his throat. "There's one more thing. With the wedding and Christmas coming, I thought we might all take a trip into Prescott next week. Get some supplies, maybe find some nice things for the occasion." This announcement was met with cheers from the younger children, who rarely got to visit the larger town. Even Caleb looked interested, though he tried to maintain his teenage dignity. "Can I get a new dress?" Charlotte asked, suddenly every inch a young lady rather than the tomboy who'd spent the previous day helping to mend fences. "Of course," Isabella promised, her heart full at the sight of her children's joy. "New clothes for everyone." As the children dispersed, chattering excitedly about the upcoming trip and wedding, Caleb lingered, looking uncertain. Isaac noticed and nodded to Isabella, who tactfully moved away to give them privacy. "You all right with this, son?" Isaac asked quietly. "It's a big change for all of us." Caleb nodded slowly. "I like Isabella and the kids even if they're noisy." He hesitated, then added, "Mom would want you to be happy, so would Emma." Isaac's throat tightened with emotion. "Thank you for saying that. Means a lot coming from you." Caleb shrugged, embarrassed by the sentiment. "Just don't expect me to call her mother or anything." "Wouldn't dream of it," Isaac assured him with a smile. "You've got a mother. Isabella knows and respects that. She's not trying to replace Caroline, just make her own place here." Caleb seemed satisfied with this answer. "I'm going to check on that new colt," he said, and headed for the door with the easy confidence of a young man who knew his place in the world. Isaac watched him go, pride and love evident in his expression. Then he turned to Isabella, who had been pretending not to listen while wiping down the already clean kitchen table. "That went well," she said softly. Isaac crossed to her, taking the cloth from her hands and setting it aside. "Better than I hoped." The little ones are easy, they're young enough to adjust quickly. It's Caleb I was worried about. He's a good boy. You've raised him well." Isabella leaned into him, allowing herself the luxury of being held. "I won't try to replace his mother, Isaac, I promise." "I know. And I won't try to replace Michael for your children, but we can build something new together, something just as real and important." Isaac pressed a kiss to her temple. "A family, wild and imperfect, and ours." "Wild and imperfect and ours," Isabella repeated, liking the sound of it. "That sounds perfect to me." The trip to Prescott the following week was an adventure for all of them. The town, larger and more established than Jerome, bustled with pre-holiday activity. Isabella and Charlotte visited the dressmaker, where Charlotte's eyes grew round at the sight of fabrics finer than anything she'd ever owned. Isabella commissioned a wedding dress in deep blue velvet, practical enough to be worn again, but special enough to mark the occasion. Isaac took the boys to the saddlery and general store, allowing them to help select gifts for the women and necessities for the ranch. Caleb, nearly a man now, was given the responsibility of choosing a new rifle for himself, a Christmas present, an acknowledgement of his growing role on the ranch. They met for lunch at a hotel dining room, the children on their best behavior despite the excitement of the day. Isabella watched as Isaac interacted with her children, patient with Henry's endless questions, attentive to James's careful observations about the town's layout, respectful of Charlotte's emerging womanhood. He would be a good father to them, she knew, different from Michael but equally loving in his own way. As they prepared to leave, Isaac pulled Isabella aside, pressing a small package into her hand. "Something for you. Don't open it until we're home." The mysterious gift burned in her pocket all the way back to the ranch. That night, after the children were asleep, Isabella finally unwrapped it to find a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. Inside were 2 miniature photographs, one of her 3 children, taken in a photography studio in Prescott that afternoon, and one of Isaac and Caleb. "So you can keep all your family close to your heart," Isaac said softly, watching as tears filled her eyes. "It's beautiful," Isabella whispered, deeply touched by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "Will you put it on for me?" Isaac fastened the chain around her neck, his fingers brushing her skin in a way that sent shivers down her spine. When she turned to face him, the look in his eyes made her breath catch. "I love you, Isabella O'Malley," he said simply. "Have since the day you stood in Miller's store with your chin up and your children at your back, looking like you'd take on the whole world if you had to." "I love you too," she replied, the words coming easily now that they'd been spoken aloud. "More than I thought possible after Michael." "Different loves," Isaac said with understanding. "Both real." Their kiss sealed the promise between them, a bridge from past to future, from loss to renewal. The weeks leading up to Christmas and the wedding flew by in a flurry of preparation. Isabella and Charlotte sewed new curtains for the main house, while Isaac and the boys expanded the master bedroom to accommodate a larger bed. The entire ranch took on a festive air, with evergreen boughs decorating the mantels and a small tree set up in the corner of the parlor. The wedding itself was simple but meaningful. The preacher rode out from Jerome on Christmas Eve morning. The ceremony took place in the main house, decorated for the occasion with candles and the last of Isabella's dried flowers from the garden. The ranch hands and their families attended, along with a few neighbors and the Millers from town. Isabella wore her blue velvet dress, her hair arranged by Charlotte in a coronet of braids. The children stood beside them, witnesses to the union that would formalize their family. Caleb, tall and serious in his best shirt, handed over the ring that Isaac had secretly purchased in Prescott. "I, Isaac, "Take thee, Isabella, to be my wedded wife," Isaac said, his deep voice steady as he repeated the traditional vows. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part." Isabella's voice was clear as she made the same promises, meaning every word with all her heart. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Isaac kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes and caused the assembled guests to break into applause. The celebration that followed was joyous, a feast prepared by Isabella and the women of the neighboring ranches. Music from a fiddle played by one of the hands, dancing in the cleared parlor. The children stayed up far too late, drunk on excitement and the small glasses of watered-down punch they were allowed for the toast. Finally, as the night deepened and the guests departed, Isabella and Isaac found themselves alone in the main house. The children had been settled in the cabin for the night, with Caleb given the responsibility of watching over his new siblings. "Well, Mrs. Owens," Isaac said, taking her hands in his, "welcome home." "It's been home for some time now," Isabella replied softly, "but this makes it official." Isaac led her to the bedroom, their bedroom now, where a fire burned low in the grate, casting a warm glow over the new quilt on the expanded bed. With gentle hands, he helped her remove the pins from her hair, watching as it fell in waves down her back. "You're beautiful," he whispered. Inside and out, Isabella felt none of the shyness she might have expected. This was Isaac, her husband, the man who had seen her at her most vulnerable and most strong and loved her through it all. "So are you," she said, reaching up to trace the lines of his face. "My cowboy, my husband." Their coming together was both tender and passionate, a culmination of months of growing feeling and the promise of years to come. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, Isabella felt a sense of completion, of having found her place in the world. "What are you thinking?" Isaac asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I'm happy," Isabella replied simply. "Truly happy in a way I wasn't sure was possible anymore." Isaac pressed a kiss to her hair. "That's all I want, for you, for the children, for all of us." "We'll have our challenges," Isabella said realistically. "The children will still be wild at times. Ranching is never easy. Life has a way of throwing the unexpected at us." "True," Isaac agreed, "but we'll face it together. And some wildness is good for the soul, keeps life interesting." Isabella smiled in the darkness, thinking of her journey from desperate widow to beloved wife, from uncertain mother to confident partner. "I was wild once before finding home," she whispered, echoing the thought she'd had that first day on the ranch. "Now I've found it not just a place, but a person, a family, a future." "Home," Isaac repeated, his arm tightening around her. "That's what we'll build together, Isabella, a home for all our wild hearts." As Christmas morning dawned bright and clear, Isabella woke in her husband's arms, feeling the promise of that home in every heartbeat. Outside, she could already hear the children's excited voices as they discovered the gifts beneath the tree. Soon they would burst in, unable to contain their joy any longer. There would be presents and laughter, a holiday feast, and the beginning of traditions that would shape their family for years to come. But for now, in these quiet moments between night and day, between their past lives and their future together, Isabella savored the simple miracle of having found love again in this wild, beautiful country. When the bedroom door finally flew open and 3 excited children, followed by a more restrained but equally eager Caleb, tumbled in, Isabella and Isaac welcomed them with open arms, making room on the bed for all of them. "Merry Christmas," Isaac said, his voice rough with emotion as he looked at the family they had created, his son, her children, now theirs together. "And happy wedding day," Charlotte added, her eyes bright with happiness. "The happiest," Isabella agreed, meeting Isaac's gaze over their children's heads. In his eyes she saw the same certainty she felt in her heart, that no matter what challenges lay ahead, they had found in each other the strength and love to meet them. Years later, when visitors to the Owens ranch remarked on their lively household, now expanded to include twin boys born the following winter, Isabella would smile at Isaac and say, "My children are wild." And he would always respond with a knowing look. So was their mother, before finding home. In those words lay the story of their love, a love born of resilience and hope, nurtured by understanding and respect, and made stronger by the wildness they embraced rather than tamed in each other. It was a love that had transformed a house into a home and strangers into family, proving that even the wildest hearts could find peace in the right arms.